Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach, and today I just wanted to talk about some of the guys that stood out to me at last weekend's NFL Scouting Combine. I know it's a little late to be getting combine coverage out, but I was a little under the weather earlier in the week when I wanted to get this done. So ideally, I would have wanted to get this done Monday, but under the weather, unable to record till now. So figured now I'd get that content out. So just going over some guys that stood out to me at this year's NFL Combine. I'm going to start off with defensive players. And the first one I want to talk about is Braden Fisk, defensive tackle out of Florida State. This is a guy that kind of started generating some buzz Senior Bowl week. Heard all week how he was having like really good practices and kind of carried that momentum with him into the combine. So the combine, he looked very explosive, very athletic. Context, he was rated at roughly 290 pounds. He ran a 4.78 40, had a 33.5-inch vertical and a 9-foot 9-inch broad jump that led all defensive tackles at the NFL Combine in those categories. This guy that just, to me, looked very athletic, looked very explosive, and definitely a guy that got his draft stock to rise and definitely immediately stood out to me the first day of the Combine. Moving on, talk about Jalix Hunt as an edge rusher out of Houston Christian University, so small school guy. He's another guy that looked very athletic. He ran a 4.64 in the 40. That was number 8 amongst all edge rushers. 37.5-inch vertical, which was like number 4 for edge rushers, and a 10-foot 8-inch broad jump, which was tied for first amongst edge rushers with Chop Robinson. So Jalix Hunt, another guy that looked very explosive, and a small school guy is probably not a guy that a lot of people have seen or heard of, but definitely should have caught the eye of some people to look back and see what they can find of him on film, and see if his film correlates to what he did at the combine. Moving on to a guy that I just briefly talked about, and that's Chop Robinson, the edge rusher from Penn State. Just told you how explosive he was with his broad jump. He had a 10-foot 8, but he's also very fast. He ran a 4.48 40-yard dash, which was number 2 for the edge rushers. So the guy very explosive, very athletic. And the guy that was just faster than him at the edge rusher position on the 40 was Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. Dallas Turner ran a 4.46, so he's the number 1 edge rusher in that. He had a 40.5-inch vertical, number 1 edge rusher in that. And he had a 10-foot 7-inch broad jump, so just behind Chop Robinson and Jalix Hunt in terms of that. So a very explosive guy. Moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is linebacker Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State. Another guy, he had a very good Senior Bowl week. He looked very good in Senior Bowl practices. I don't believe he actually played in the game, but very good week down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Was kind of building some hype for himself. He looked very good at the combine in the on-field drills, and looked pretty explosive in his the 40-yard dash, and his jumps. He ran a 4.43 40-yard dash, which was the fastest of all linebackers at the combine. He had a 34.5-inch vertical, which was 9th amongst linebackers, and a 9-foot 11-inch broad jump, which was also 9th amongst linebackers. So he looks very explosive. He looks very fluid out on the field. Looks like a very good linebacker. His main issue is he just has a bunch of he just has some injury concerns from college. Maybe suffered a knee injury while in college. So if he can show teams that medically he's fine, his knee is good to go, then He's a guy that should go very, should be probably no later than, you know, early day 2 pick, probably somewhere in the second round. But also Peyton Wilson, Dallas Turner, and Chop Robinson, um, all three linebackers slash edge rushers that ran sub 4.40s or sub 4.5 40s, my bad, which is faster than some of the defensive backs that are 30 plus pounds lighter than these guys. So it's very impressive. I like seeing fast linebackers slash edge rushers. Now moving on to some defensive backs. I'm going to start off with the corners. Guys stood out to me. Number one was Quinyon Mitchell from cornerback from Toledo. So he got in a 4.33 40-yard dash, was the number 2 corner. Second only to Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson is not one of the guys that really stood out to me because we didn't get to see him do on-field drills. He suffered a hip flexor injury running the 40-yard dash. So he had a very impressive 40, a 4.28, but unfortunately wasn't able to see him on the field. And Quinyon Mitchell also had a 38-inch vertical and a 10-foot broad jump. He also looked very good in the on-field drills. Next guy that impressed me at the corner position was Daquan Hardy, corner from Penn State. He ran a 4.38 40, had a 42.5-inch vertical, which was the number 1 against all against all corners, and a 10-foot 6-inch broad jump. So, the guy looks very explosive and looked very good. Moving on, the last 3 guys, I kind of want to lump them together because they did very similar in how they produced at the combine, and that's Jarian Jones from Florida State, Max Melton from Rutgers, and Elijah Jones from Boston College. So Jarian Jones and Max Melton ran 4.38 and 4.39 in the 40-yard dash in their 40-yard dash attempts. So it was faster than Elijah Jones, who was a 4.44. Jarian Jones had a 39.5-inch vertical jump, which was tied for 5th amongst corners. Max Melton had a 40.5-inch vertical jump, which was tied for 3rd amongst corners. And Elijah Jones had a 42.5-inch, which was the number tied for 1st amongst corners. So the reason I kind of want to lump all these guys together is they're guys that, in terms of Max Melton and Elijah Jones, they're played at Power 5 conference schools, but kind of teams that are lesser talked about, not really looked at as much because they're usually towards the bottom of their conference. And Jarian Jones, being at Florida State, a team that only went undefeated in the regular season, he wasn't really talked about either that much at Florida State. It's kind of overshadowed by other draft prospects such as Brendan Fisk and Jared Verse. But Jarian Jones is another guy that looked very good at the NFL Combine and hopefully can build some momentum, or going into his pro day and going to the draft, and hopefully can build some momentum going into the draft and can be a good NFL player. Moving on to safeties. First, I want to talk about Jalen Carlisle from Missouri. Jalen Carlisle from Missouri. So he's a defensive back that is 6'2", 227 pounds. Reason I emphasize his size is because he came out and he ran a 4.5 40-yard dash, which is faster than a lot of linebackers that he's very similar in size to. On top of that, he jumped 32.5 inches and had a 10-foot 5-inch broad jump, which was tied for 5th amongst all safeties. So looked very explosive. Definitely ran faster than he looked like he was going to with his size. So that should have helped him out. Next, I want to talk about Tyler Owens, safety from Texas Tech. This guy came and has showed tremendous jumping ability. So he got a 41-inch vertical and a 12-foot 2-inch broad jump. Those both led all safeties, and his broad jump was 1 inch away from tying the combine record. So the combine record is 12 foot 3 inches, and he was very close to that. Fortunately, like, I'm pretty sure he injured himself on his first 40 attempt. He didn't even finish it. He pulled up and did not participate in the 40. Next, I want to talk about two safeties from Utah. First off, I want to talk about Cole Bishop, who came out. He tested very well showed very good speed and explosiveness in his jumps. He ran a 4.45 40-yard dash, which was the number 3, which was third amongst safeties. Had a 39-inch vertical, which was tied for fourth amongst safeties, and a 10-foot 4-inch broad jump, which was tied for sixth amongst safeties. Guy looks very explosive athlete. Next, his teammate Sione Vaki from Utah, player that played both ways at points in college. He played safety and he got some reps at running back, which he had 5 offensive touchdowns in the 2023 season. So there were some scouts and analysts that think he actually would have come out better as a running back than as a safety if he had chosen to declare for the draft as a running back. So he didn't run the fastest. He was one of the slowest safeties with a 4.62 40-yard dash time, but his jumps were very good. He had a 39.5-inch vertical, which was tied for third amongst safeties, and a 10-foot 5-inch broad jump, which was tied for fifth amongst safeties. So yeah, that looks like he could be a very versatile player. You could get him on offense if you needed. Looks like you could put him a few different places on the field. Moving on to the offensive side of so that's all I've got for defense. Those are my standouts for the defensive side of the combine. Moving on to offense, I'll start with the tight ends, and the one that stood up even most for me is Tip Ryman, the tight end from Illinois. He's a guy. He didn't have much production in college, and at least in terms of catching the ball, he didn't have much production in college. He came out and he tested very well. He ran a 4.6 4.40. Which was the number 6 amongst tight ends, 33.5-inch vertical, also number 6 amongst tight ends, and a 10-foot 1-inch broad jump, which was tied for 5th amongst tight ends. But where he also really stood out was the blocking sled drill. He looked by far the best out of any tight end at the combine at blocking, which is very important. That alone, his blocking ability alone could get him a spot on an NFL roster. It's very difficult to find tight ends that good at blocking coming into the NFL. You can work on, making him a better receiver or trying to figure out ways to get him the ball more. But if you have a tight end that can block, he's going to find his way onto the field. Next, I want to talk about Ben Sinot, tight end from Kansas State. The guy came out, he looked very athletic and very good. Athletically, he ran a 4.68 40-yard dash, which was number 8 amongst tight ends, and he jumped very well. He had a 40-inch vertical and a 10-foot 6-inch broad jump. Both of which were number 1 amongst tight ends. So, it's very athletic and probably a guy that could do very well with jump balls in the NFL. Moving on to Theo Johnson, tight end from Penn State. Another guy looked very athletic. He had a 4.57 40, a 39.5-inch vertical, and a 10-foot 5-inch broad jump, all of which were number 2 amongst tight ends. So another guy that looks very athletic and could be really a big threat in the red zone and in jump ball situations. The final tight end I want to talk about is Jaheim Bell from Florida State. So another guy, very athletic, ran a 4.61 40, which was tied for 3rd amongst tight ends, had a 35-inch vertical, which was tied for 4th amongst tight ends, and had a 10-foot 4-inch broad jump, which was number 3 amongst tight ends. So it's very athletic, very explosive, and he's a guy that you can kind of move around and put not just as a traditional tight end, you can kind of split him out and kind of have him in the slot a little bit. In the receiving basis, you can kind of move him around as like an H-back, tight end hybrid. This guy, looked very good to me at the combine. Moving on to the running backs, I have my running backs split up kind of in two different categories for how they stood out to me. A handful of guys that stood out to me just based on their athletic ability alone, who I'm going to start with, and then move on to guys that stood out to me for their on-field drills. So guys that stood out athletically, Isaac Garendo from Louisville. He was the fastest running back with a 4.33 40-yard dash. He had a 41.5-inch vertical, which was the number one against running backs, and a 10-foot 9-inch broad jump, which was number two among running backs. Also, Jalen Wright, very fast. He had a 4.38 40-yard dash, which was number two amongst running backs. He was the number four running back in vertical with a 38-inch vertical, and the number one running back in the broad jump with an 11-foot 2-inch broad jump. Another guy athletically stood out to me was Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. He ran a 4.48 40, number six amongst running backs, and very good jumping, 40-inch vertical and a 10-foot 4-inch broad jump, which was number five. The broad jump was number five for running backs. His vertical was number two for running backs. And this is a guy that is a converted wide receiver to running back, which is something you don't see often. Most guys will switch from running back to wide receiver instead of going from wide receiver to running back. And Trey Benson from Florida State, he's a player that's 6 foot tall and close to 215 pounds. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. He was the third fastest running back. The third fastest running back, and then he was top 15 for the vertical and top 10 for the broad jump. So very athletic running back for his size. Moving on to the guys that just stood out to me for what they did in the drills and how good they looked and how fluid they looked in their drills was Blake Corum from Michigan, Marshawn Lloyd from USC, Bray Davis from Kentucky, Isaiah Davis from South Dakota State, and Dylan Laube from University of New Hampshire. These are all guys that had varying degrees of how they tested in terms of like the 40-yard dash and stuff. But once you got them on the field and doing the on-field drills, they all looked very good and very comfortable and very fluid in those. Next, we're going to move on to the quarterbacks. A handful of quarterbacks that stood out to me. Number one was J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. So I just liked seeing him, be able to make throws that he didn't really get to do at Michigan, like a bunch of the deep ball passes looked very good, and he just, looked very good throwing the football. Next up is Joe Milton from Tennessee. Joe Milton has a cannon for an arm. He can throw the deep ball better. He threw the deep ball better than anybody at the combine, and he has a Josh Allen-like arm in terms of just, arm power. He's a guy that I saw him play the 2020 season when he was at Michigan, and he didn't look all that good. But he's a guy that, and that arm talent, you see that arm talent, and you just think this is a guy that has to, if you can find a way to make it click and put it all together, Joe Milton would be an amazing NFL quarterback. So Michael Penix Jr. from Washington. He didn't look again overly impressive, for arm strength, but he looked very accurate. He threw the ball just very well and with a lot of accuracy. And finally, Devin Leary, the quarterback from Kentucky, he just looked very good and very natural throwing the football. Like, of all the quarterbacks from the group that he was in, which included Joe Milton and J.J. McCarthy, he looked the best just throwing regular passes. Not so much on the deep stuff, but like the short and intermediate passes, he looked the best. So now moving on to wide receivers, there was a lot of wide receivers that stood out to me. So I'm going to start with kind of the first group that I have of guys that looked good. All of these guys ran mid 4.3s to low 4.4s in the 40, and all of them jumped very well. First was Lad McConkey from Georgia. He had a 4.39 40-yard dash, and very good in the jumping as well. Anthony Gold from Oregon State also had a 4.39 40 and jumped very well. Ricky Parcells from Florida had a 4.41 40. Xavier Legette from South Carolina had a 4.39 40. And Tez Walker from North Carolina had a 4.36 40. So all these guys look very fast. They weren't the fastest guys, but they looked very fast and looked like they jumped very well. Lad McConkey and Ricky Parcells both ran faster than I thought they would. It was very surprising to see them run that quickly, that fast. Also, Roma Duze looked very good. He ran in the mid 4.4s, looked very good jumping, and looked very good in the drills. Two guys that were incredibly fast and looked incredibly explosive was Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, who ran a 4.33 40, and A.D. Mitchell from Texas ran a 4.34 40. Both of those very, very good 40s, very fast, both look very explosive. Before I talk about the last guy, I just want to talk about Keon Coleman real quick. He didn't run very fast. He ran somewhere in the low 4.6, 4.61 for the 40. And then he was the fastest in the gauntlet drill for the wide receivers. So he looked very good in that drill, which should correlate to how he does on the field. So I just want to give a quick mention of Keon Coleman. Although he didn't look the best athletic, like the most explosive athletically for those aspects, he looked very good on the field. Final receiver I want to talk about is Xavier Worthy from Texas. This guy has got elite speed. He ran a 4.21 40-yard dash, breaking the combine record set by John Ross. I know that speed isn't everything, because John Ross is a very good example of that. A guy that ran very fast, got picked top 10 in the NFL draft, and then didn't pan out. It's always very exciting to see guys with this kind of speed and then hope that they can do well in the NFL. The final group of guys I want to talk about is just the offensive linemen. All of these are offensive tackles that I want to talk about. It's Joe Alt from Notre Dame. Looked very good on field, as did Talisi Fuaga from Oregon State. Also Troy Futanu from Washington. This guy that coming into the combine, people didn't really know if he should play guard, if he should stay out at tackle. And then he came in and he measured, I think, bigger. His arms were longer than people thought they were going to be. So it looks like he could stay out at tackle and be very good at that. Also, just two guys that stuck out to me like athletically, but are lesser known, talked about guys, is Frank Crum from Wyoming and Tyler Grable from UCF. Both guys looked very athletic, and I think kind of raised their draft stock from just how they looked running, jumping, and then out on the field. You guys know, if leave a comment, let me know if there's anybody that you guys think stuck out personally for you in the NFL Combine, if somebody I missed. I know there's definitely guys that I missed, but I didn't really want to talk for an hour about the NFL Combine. So, free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment as to what you guys thought about the NFL Combine. Until next time.